But rather than get on my own soliloquy or my own diatribe going off about everything, I decided to bring in the experts, okay? Because I wanted to talk to a colleague of mine, formerly at ESPN, where he worked with me at ESPN for 15 years, okay, before departing in 2020, all right? This guy right here, a boxing analyst extraordinaire, a boxing writer extraordinaire, the one and only Dan Rafael. What's going on, big time? How are you, man? How's everything?
Hey, Stephen A., it's great to talk to you. Thanks for having me on. I appreciate the intro.
First of all, let's get right to it. When you heard the news that this is a potential fight, this is a likely fight coming down the pike with Canelo versus the bigger Charlo, Jermall Charlo, your thoughts?
Well, I was not surprised, but I'll be honest, I was a bit disappointed. And by the way, this is not something that just has come up in recent days. If you go back to the period of time just prior to the signing of the fight between Canelo and Jermall Charlo, who is his younger brother, twin brother, who was at that time the undisputed junior middleweight champion of the world at 154 pounds, who was going to move up 2 weight classes when he fought Canelo. Originally, it was supposed to be Canelo against the big Charlo, who's one of the champions at 160 pounds. So the fight between Canelo and Jermall was already in play prior to when he fought the brother. But the brother, the 160-pounder, was not able to get to the fight because he was having his own issues outside the ring. He was dealing with some mental health problems and those sorts of things. And so, therefore, it was sort of like they did the switcheroo. Instead of going with the 160-pound Charlo, they went with the 154-pound Charlo. That is who Canelo fought in the last fight, lost basically every single round. And now here you have Canelo preparing for what will be a fight on May 4th, the Cinco de Mayo holiday, and they needed an opponent. And so apparently the bigger Charlo, Jermall, who would also be moving up a weight class instead of 2 weight classes like his brother did, he's back in the mix. Now, as I have described it, those are the rumors, but the fight is not signed. It is not done. It has not been publicly announced. As I have described it, he is the leader in the clubhouse in a group of fighters that would be probably a lot more appealing.
When is Canelo going to get criticized for all of this? And I'm not trying to imply that nobody has thrown any criticism his way, Dan. But here's my problem with this. You fought Bivol, you lost. You've got 2 draws on your resume along with 2 losses. So as Teddy Atlas, the great Teddy Atlas once said, recently said, by the way, he could easily be deemed as being 60-4. I'm not even sweating that. My issue, Dan, is you're fought a dude 2 weight classes lower than you in a smaller Charlo, Jermall Charlo. Now you're talking about Jermall Charlo, who would also have to move up, correcting me from earlier because I talked about him being at 168 when in fact he's at 160. I'm just saying, David Benavidez is at 168, the reigning, this dude is 28-0 with 24 knockouts. How has Canelo gotten away with avoiding him this damn long?
Well, as far as the who he's going to fight and not being criticized, I think some people, they do, and I'm among this group, I admit this, that you give Canelo a little bit of slack because in the end he has fought all of the guys, maybe not at the exact moment that you or me would like to see them take place, but he has gone through and fought the top fighters. And I also will give him a lot of credit for having the stones to go up to 175 pounds to fight Bivol, who was an undefeated fighter, who was a great technical boxer, who was at worst the number 2 guy in that weight class, who's about to fight in June for the undisputed title.
But not a knockout artist. But not a knockout artist. I get your point and would completely side with you, Dan, if you were talking about Benavidez. But Benavidez is the monster in the light heavyweight division. He's undefeated. He's the knockout artist. He's the one that pummels opponents. It's not like Canelo fought him, but I understand you avoiding him because you're not a natural light heavyweight. So why fight a natural light heavyweight who will punish you to death? So you're fighting Bivol, that's fine to move up to fight a technical fighter that isn't necessarily a knockout artist, even though you ultimately lost to him by decision. But at the super middleweight division, you've got David Benavidez there. This is a weight that Canelo has maturated to naturally, I might add. And I'm just saying, fighting smaller guys really is the problem for me when you're a power puncher and a mauler the way that Canelo Alvarez is known to be.
Yeah, listen, I can't disagree with that, but I'll just say, because of what he's done, he does get a little bit of slack, and he is the champion. He did go through that weight class, and he won all the belts. And I think at this point, he fought the Bivol fight, as you mentioned. He's come back since then, and he has won. And now people are going to get a little bit antsy, a little frustrated, because they do want to see him against some of the top guys in his own weight class. So while it's okay if you talk about, I wouldn't even give him problems if he fought Crawford, because at least you and I know that boxing is a business that will generate enormous amounts of interest in the mainstream and money. So I don't even have a problem with that. It's when you fight, if it happens, and let's keep it real, that it's not done yet. So I don't want to say it's 100%. If he does go forward and fight against Jermall Charlo in the May fight, it is because it's a move that maybe it's because Al Heyman and the folks at PBC had promised Charlo the fight before he made it an inability to get to the ring, and they gave it to the brother. But the biggest problem is it would be done over a group of other more deserving guys to challenge for the title. Benavidez clearly at the top of the list. I have shouted from the rooftops in my writings, in my Fight Freaks Unite Substack newsletter, that this guy, if you say that Canelo is the undisputed champ, which he is with all the belts, then David Benavidez, without question, is the undisputed mandatory, the undisputed people's #1 contender, the guy who is by far and away the most deserving of the opportunity. And if you stipulate to the fact that, well, he's not going to fight him yet, maybe he'll fight him in September, so they're going to need another opponent for the May fight, well, fine. Then you go and take a look at Jaime Munguia, for example, who is now still undefeated after a big win the other night, where now he's 43-0. And a fellow Mexican, which would make a lot of sense on the Cinco de Mayo holiday. There are other fighters in the weight class. David Morrell, an undefeated title holder,
big time
who,
fighter,
technically speaking, is his mandatory challenger in the WBA. There's other good quality opponents for him to fight at 168 pounds.
Terence Crawford, you brought up that name, and you said you wouldn't have a problem with it. Neither would I, to some degree, because it makes sense from a box office perspective. What I would have a problem with is this is a guy that just fought at 147. And you're talking about him fighting against a 168-pound champion. Now, if he was willing to move up and Canelo was at least willing to move down to a catch weight of, say, 160 to 158, I'm all for that. But we know that's not what Canelo's talking about. So why should we support him against a guy in Terence Crawford who is superb, arguably the best pound-for-pound fighter on the planet, but also an individual that walks around fighting 21 pounds and 3 weight divisions lighter than Canelo Alvarez?
Listen, I understand that. And just to be clear, Canelo is not the one that's been out there shouting about wanting to fight Terence Crawford. As a matter of fact, if you look at any of his public statements that he has made to any number of media outlets, he has never said that he was interested in fighting Crawford. That's come more from other people and speculation. And of course, the fact that Crawford is now aligned also with PBC. And it seems as though the rematch with Errol Spence is not going to take place for a variety of reasons, including the fact that Errol is on the sidelines after having recent cataract surgery. So Crawford's in need of an opponent, but it's not been Canelo or anybody on his team that is out there saying, I want Crawford. So I think that's more of a social media and a rumor sort of situation. I'm just making the point that if you did offer that from a commercial point of view, I get it because it's boxing. But in the spot for May, you have a plethora of available and quality guys who are legit, active 168 pounders who aren't Charlo, who, by the way, even in his last fight, when he came back after the 2+ year layoff, he fought a welterweight in Jose Benavidez. That's David's older brother. And he won that fight. And he failed to make the weight for that fight. They contracted it at 164. He came in at 166. He won the fight, fine, but he didn't look exactly terrific in that fight. So and again, I'm not knocking Charlo or his brother. I've got no beef with either one of those guys. But from an athletic point of view, he's not done one darn thing to earn a shot at the super middleweight champion of the world.
Having said all of that, what are we to make of Benavidez being avoided in the future? We look at it now and we're like, okay, fine, it's tolerable, but it's getting intolerable, to be quite honest with you. How many more fights are we going to sit idly by and let Canelo have with others that are not named David Benavidez before there's a collective uproar, not just the Dan Rafaels and Stephen A. Smiths of the world going off about it?
Well, that's a good question, because Canelo, when he signed with PBC, it was for 3 fights. The first fight took place in his last bout. That was the Jermall Charlo fight. The second fight will be the fight that comes up in May. Theoretically, that might be the Jermall Charlo fight. Then you're looking at fight number 3 of that 3-fight contract, which would be the final fight in September, which, as we mentioned, might be a Terence Crawford. Hopefully it's David Benavidez. One thing I have learned, Stephen A., is that in boxing, when you do contracts, the biggest fight usually happens in the last fight of the deal. And the David Benavidez fight, by far and away, is the biggest fight that they can make in terms of competition in his own weight class, Crawford notwithstanding,
Well,
in terms of being a smaller guy. Hopefully it's the September fight, because we know it's not the May fight.
will Al Heyman and PBC be able to make the Benavidez fight if it was Benavidez and Canelo? Because I don't recall whether or not Benavidez is under the umbrella.
Yes, he is with PBC.
Okay.
And he and his team, Samson Lukowicz, they want that fight. They say it all the time. I have zero question in my mind whatsoever. They could make that fight in 5 seconds if offered. They know the market rate. They're not going to look to blow it up because they're going to scrap for every single penny or dime on the table. They'll make that fight if offered in 2 seconds. And keep in mind, by the way, David Benavidez is the WBC's interim champion.
Yes.
And at some point, they will make him the mandatory. So if the WBC wants to at least help make the fight, it's not a guarantee because Canelo is going to do what Canelo wants to do, but they can help at least put it in play and force it to some degree by making that the mandatory and ordering the negotiation and put some pressure on Canelo to do that. But they have not really shown an aptitude or a desire or a willingness or an appetite to do that.
I'm talking to one of the greatest boxing writers in America and you. So it's apropos that I transition from Canelo to asking you this question about Terence Crawford. I don't want to see Errol Spence Jr. in the ring with him again. He got destroyed. And I thought it was the kind of ass whipping where you just don't need to have him in the ring. First of all, I thought he needed a full year off, so it looks like that's going to happen. And I'm very happy about that because he certainly didn't need to get back in the ring in December or even this summer. He needs to stay away from Crawford as far as I'm concerned. I'd love to see Jermall Charlo versus Terence Crawford. That's the fight that I think that Terence Crawford and everybody should want to see Terence Crawford have. Do you have somebody on your wish list, whether it's Charlo or somebody else, that you think would be ideal for the great Terence Crawford?
Well, I agree with you about that. I'd be perfectly fine and happy to see him fight Jermall Charlo, who is the lineal and has still one of the belts in the junior middleweight division. He's sidelined for the moment. He's got some legal issues and some problems. So it doesn't appear, though, that would be the immediate offing. So if it's not going to be Jermall Charlo, the biggest and the best fight to me as a fight fan and somebody that could also create some interest outside of the United States is a fight against Tim Tszyu, who is the WBO's junior middleweight champion. He was the long mandatory for Charlo, who had to pull out of their fight, which was scheduled for last January in Vegas. He got Charlo suffered an injury and had to call off the fight. And before it could be rescheduled, he obviously got the much bigger financial opportunity to fight Canelo. So that fight never happened. And so when he got in the ring to fight Canelo, the WBO stripped him of the title. They knew this was happening. And Tim Tszyu was elevated from the interim champion. Now he's the reigning champion. He's got a defense coming up. It will be the first main event on the PBC's new deal with Amazon Prime Video. He's fighting a non-title fight against Keith Thurman, who's been out of the ring for a while and wasn't ranked, but that's a matchup with a name. But if Tim Tszyu goes through Keith Thurman like a lot of people think he'll do in his first really big American fight, that's going to create a lot of interest. And certainly Tim Tszyu is going to be considered the #1 fighter in the division in terms of what he's been doing lately, because Charlo hasn't fought in a while in that weight class. That would be a very outstanding matchup between him against Crawford. And if you don't know the name, Tim Tszyu was the son of the great former undisputed junior welterweight champ Costa Tszyu, who's now in the Hall of Fame and one of the greats of all time in that weight class.
Well, we know Costa Tszyu. We know Zab Judah remembers him very, very well. Let me say this to you. Let me say this to you right now. No disrespect to Zab Judah, but that was funny when he got dropped by Judah, even though Zab Judah was great, and I got a lot of love for Zab Judah. Having said all of that, I don't know if Tszyu can mess with Terence Crawford. I've watched him fight. He's got a lot of power. He can take a punch. There's no question about that. But in terms of boxing skills, I don't know if he's the dude that can deal with Terence Crawford. What fighter out there, just regardless of whether it's welterweight, junior middleweight, what fighter out there do you believe has the best chance against Terence Crawford based on what you've seen from Crawford and the fighter you'll name?
Well, listen, I have Crawford ranked #1 pound for pound on my list, and so there's a reason for that. He's a superb athlete. He's a superb technician. He's very intelligent in the ring. He is vastly experienced. He comes in shape. He's got power. He's got speed. He can fight right-handed. He can fight left-handed. He really literally has no negatives in his game. Usually even the greats, you talk about the five-tool players in baseball or the guys that can do it all, in a basketball court. There's some element of their game that may not be as great as all the others. I literally don't see a single weakness in Crawford. He takes a pretty good shot. So there's not a lot of guys I can even think of that would, in my opinion, be able to hang with him. Once he dispatched and did so quite easily against Errol Spence, there's nobody in the welterweight division at all, even close, that you would even make a fight. So to find somebody that would be competitive with him, you have to sort of force him up the scale. Now, there's been Teofimo Lopez, for example, is the junior welterweight champ. He's been calling out Terence Crawford.
I think that's a mistake.
It's not an unusual scenario for the guy that's a junior welterweight champ to fight the welterweight champ. And as outstanding as Teofimo is, and he's got a fight coming up next week, I don't know if anybody would really give him a shot. So there's nobody from the lower weight classes that you can see hanging with Crawford. I said there's nobody to hang with him in the division that he's in, which is welterweight. So you got to go to the junior middleweight division. And I think the best guy in the division that could give him some problems probably would be Zoo or a Charlo, if Charlo is right and got his stuff together.
Last question, going down further within the boxing divisions in terms of weight. Gervonta Davis is Gervonta Davis. We know what his study is. He dispatched of Ryan Garcia. We get that. We understand it, even though we believe in Ryan Garcia, who's now moved up to 140. The ideal fight for Gervonta Davis would be who? Would it be a rematch against Ryan Garcia? Would it be going up against Teofimo Lopez? Who would it be? Would it be Devin Haney entertaining that kind of fight? Last question. Who do you believe would be the best, most ideal, most attractive fight for Gervonta Davis and the public?
Well, it's certainly not a rematch with Davis. I mean, between Davis and Garcia, Garcia would probably have to earn that, and I could see it maybe down the road. But in terms of next, you have to look at the other best guys at 100, in his weight class. He's a 135 pounder, but his best opponents are really at 140, and he has fought in that weight class too. So I would say, for my money, I'd like to see him fight either Teofimo Lopez or Devin Haney. Take your pick. I don't care. Got you. Dan Rafael, before I let you get on out of here, you brought up Substack. I want you to tell everybody where to find your work, and what you've been doing. I appreciate that. Yeah, Substack, the newsletter platform. I write my Fight Freaks Unite. I'm the publisher of the one-man band over there. I've been doing it for the past 3 years or so since I left ESPN. It's been a great experience. Fight Freaks Unite, danrafael.substack.com. Please come join the party. Punch in your email and get the as I say, Stephen A., punch in your email. You don't have to go search for the boxing news. It comes to you. I appreciate you as always, man. It's good seeing you. It's been a long time, man. Really, really good talking to you. You take it easy, okay? Thank you, Stephen A. All right, buddy.